Hello, friends. We are back with episode 168 of the Our Weekly Highlights podcast. We're so glad you're here listening from wherever you are around the world. And this is the show. If you are new to this podcast, this is the show where we talk about the terrific resources that have been highlighted in this week's Our Weekly issue, all available at ourweekly.org. My name is Eric Nance, and as always, I'm delighted that you've joined us from wherever you are. We have a lot of fun things to talk about, but this is a team effort after all, and I got my partner in our related crime here, so to speak. Mike Thomas is here. Join me at the hip. How are you doing today, Mike?
Doing pretty well, Eric. Not to violate any HIPAA laws and knock on wood, I am currently trying to dodge pink eye in our household. So far, so good, but I've heard that it's not fun. This is our first go around with it, so please pray for me. But
we have you in our thoughts for sure, as somebody who's had a whole smorgasbord of illnesses, viruses, things, and that in the kiddos' daycare days. Yeah, you keep strong, my friend.
Thank you very much. But Eric, how was your weekend?
Yeah, you know what? It's been a while since we did this. We're gonna dust off a segment I used to do in my live streams.
Who's ready for story time with
our podcast,
baby?
It's story time with Eric now, so let's buckle up for a few minutes here. So Friday night, I get a little opportunity to do a little, open source development work on some of this podcasting database stuff. I've been pitching in with the Podcasting 2.0 project, and recently Dave Jones, who helps spearheads a lot of that effort, gave me access to some more lower level JSON files and object storage to help analyze some of the data that's going into their database as kind of a more real-time access of it. And these are actually massive JSON files. In fact, one of them is over 200 gigs worth. So I figured, okay, you know what? To help, minimize the bandwidth costs just for once, I'm going to download a snapshot of those locally on my, somewhat beefy network storage down in the basement, where I have like a group of 4 hard drives networked together, and that's where I do all my backups. So I figured, you know what, I'm just going to throw it on there. That way I can, work with them in a prototyping way, like any good citizen would do with bandwidth and everything like that. So that was like earlier in the week, and then Friday night rolls around. I'm going to do a little hacking on it again, just kind of get to know those files a bit. Go to the path on my laptop, mounts this as like a Samba share. But I go to, and it's run Linux, but Samba is the protocol. So in any event, I go to grab one of these files, or always read it into R. It's kind of like a prototyping. And then I get a path file not found. And I'm thinking, what's this about? I know I downloaded it earlier in the week, and it's alongside a bunch of my other kind of R open source, like big file stuff. And I go into the SSH session to my network storage that's running Linux, and I navigate to that area, directory not found.
Oh, no.
Oh, boy. So I do a little poking around, and I realize that's not the only thing not found. I am now not able to see some very, and I mean very important family media files, which, if you guess, are pictures and videos that I've recorded over the years. Gone.
No.
Now, when I set this up many years ago, I did put in a couple backup strategies, one of which was to send my pictures over to Google Drive, albeit in an encrypted way, so that I didn't feel like I was feeding their machine learning algorithms for image recognition and whatnot. And so I quickly dust off my notes on how to interact with that. I was using a service called Duplicati to get that. And luckily enough, I did get the majority of my pictures back, albeit they stopped working after 2023, which was odd because I didn't get an alert on that. So that's one downside. But what was not on that cloud backup were the videos. So back to this internal setup, I have what's called a pooled file system of all these drives put together. And then there was a weekly job I would run It was kind of like RAID, if you ever heard of like how network drives are backed up in like a mirrored way. RAID is one way to do it. This is a different take called Snap RAID, where it would every week funnel everything into what's called a parity drive. And that way, if the worst happened, I could restore from that parity drive and get everything back. So I figured, oh, yes, I did run that job, right? And I go to where that file would be stored. It's like this big compressed file. But then my heart sank because the last run of that apparently was in 2020. And I didn't know that. I still ran the restore anyway, just to see what happens. And sure enough, I got videos and pictures and other important files up to that point. So I am missing now almost 4 years worth of important content. So, of course, now I investigate, can I mount this drive somewhere else? Can I just take it out of this network storage and put it into like an enclosure, connect it to my laptop, see if I can somehow salvage the files from there? That's when I realized there's the problem. The hard drive is making this sequential kind of buzzing kind of sound and cannot be recognized by any OS. That screams hardware failure. So I have now sent this to a drive recovery vendor. I'm waiting to hear back for the evaluation if they can get everything back. But if they are able to get it back, I hate to say it, it's not going to be cheap to get it back. But this is a very harsh lesson, folks. If you have a backup strategy, make sure to check that it's actually working. If you learn nothing else from this 5-minute diatribe, look at your backup strategy. Make as many notes as you can, because future self will need it when you absolutely positively least expect it, like little old me here.
Eric, I'm so sorry. For our dear listeners out there, I asked Eric how his weekend was, and he would not tell me because he wanted to get my live reaction during the recording. And my live reaction is despair, but I am almost also not entirely surprised, because I feel like story time with Eric probably sways a little towards the bad as opposed to the good, if we're taking a look at the distribution of sort of sentiment around story time with Eric stories. I am sorry to hear that. I hope that hardware vendor can help you out some way, somehow, and it's not super expensive. But yes, that is, I think, something we all struggle with is backing up and storage of especially like family media and stuff like that. I don't have a good strategy for it. That hurts my heart. That hurts my heart, because I know how much work you've invested into building out, your hardware and software infrastructure in the best ways possible and using the best practices. So I'm so sorry to hear that.
Oh, I appreciate that. But life is so ironic, right? Of all the drives to fail, the one that has the majority of these family files, that had to be the one. I've got other nonsense on there that I could live without. It's just out of convenience, but it had to be that one. So on top of, this vendor, crossing my fingers, I will not say who they are because I'm not sure if it's going to work or not, so I'm not giving any free advertising here. I hope this vendor actually pulls it off. But the other lesson is I was kind of living on borrowed time with some of the infrastructure around this, so I am building as we speak. The parts are coming in the next couple of weeks. A brand new server that's going to have a much better strategy around it. So there you go. That'll be some rabbit holes.
It does not surprise me at all. Best of luck with that.
Yes, thank you, sir. And one way or another, I'll share my learnings. This machine will double purpose. It will not just be a storage piece. This may be a piece where I can do some local either machine learning stuff, AI stuff, or whatnot, because I'm gonna spec it out pretty well for those workflows and media production. So it'll be a fun journey nonetheless. Just not one I was quite ready to do until this certain event.
Well, once you install the Microsoft operating system and turn the Microsoft recall switch on, you'll never have to worry about backing up anything ever again, because it'll just watch you all the time.
You know what? Yeah, what better peace of mind than to send that over to whatever they're training on. Oh, my goodness. For those of you that aren't aware of what we're talking about, that Microsoft kind of got in a bit of a kerfuffle when they announced this feature, if you want to call it that, where they would have a background process on your Windows installation, literally every, 30 seconds.
Oh, no, I think it's less than that. I think it's like every second or every other second.
Me.
It's going to take a picture of what's on your laptop screen.
Wow. Just wow. Is hopefully some of you may think, yeah, that might have some disasters associated with it, and many reasons. So they are rolling it back a little bit in terms of how they're rolling it out. But nonetheless, the cat's out of the bag, as they say, of what they've been planning for this. So I think more to come on this side of it. But yeah, of all the things I did not expect to see, that announcement was one of them.
Likewise. It just makes me want to install Linux instead.
And you're not alone. There's a lot of people making the switch after that kind of news, and Apple hasn't quite done themselves any favors either with some of their decisions. But
on to the R stuff.
Yeah, we've digressed enough. But in any event, we don't have hardware failures to talk about in these highlights, thank goodness. And they have been curated this week by Tony Elharbar, another one of our awesome curators on the R Weekly team. He's been around for quite a couple of years now. And as always, he had tremendous help from our fellow R Weekly team members and contributors like all of you around the world with your awesome pull requests and suggestions. And we lead off the show with really a testament and a glimpse into the vast variety that's available to us with the nature of open source, and especially some of the fundamental issues that can occur, not just from a development perspective, but also from a social and other type of perspective as well. And this blog post in our first highlight comes from Kelly Bodwin, who is an assistant professor of statistics at Cal Pi, that is California Polytechnic State University, for those that are outside of the U.S. and may not know where that is. But in any event, she leads off with framing this discussion on two paths, if you might say, in the R community with respect to a lot of the ways that we handle data manipulation, data processing, and what has been perceived to be these separate roads traveled, so to speak. So she frames this post in light of Robert Frost's The Road Less Traveled story. And she also is upfront that this definitely has some opinions. Hey, Mike and I are full of opinions on this show too, but as we go through this, I definitely see exactly where she's coming from, and I think it's definitely an important discussion to have. What we're talking about here are two major frameworks that have kind of over time become pretty mainstream in terms of the R community's efforts for data manipulation. One is the tidyverse, which is well known by this point. Of course, the development of the tidyverse has been led by Hadley Wickham and his team of engineers at Posit. And then we have data.table. Data.table was around well before the tidyverse. Data.table, for those that aren't aware, had its first major release in 2008. Yeah, that's a dozen in the history books on this. And it was originally released by the core developer Matt Dow. And there's a link in Kelly's post for a nice video of what inspired Data.table in the first place. And it, from near the beginning, Data.table has been so influential for many in the industry and academia, all walks of the life, so to speak, in the R community, with respect to its very great performance in importing large data files. It's got its own, you might call DSL or domain-specific language for how you conduct queries and whatnot, and how you do like group summaries or filtering or creating new variables. It's got a syntax that is unique to it, and once you learn the ins and outs of it, it can be extremely powerful. And then, fast forward about 6 years later, dplyr, one of the cornerstones of what became the tidyverse, was released in 2014, again authored by Hadley Wickham, and this, a lot of people point to this as the start of the tidyverse because of this new, at least new to many people at the time, way of performing these, fit for purpose functions that use the data frame as like the main input, such that you could combine this with the Magrider pipe and do a lot of these nice kind of flowing analyses of data manipulation, new variables, summarizations, group processing, and whatnot. So with this, you now have, as Kelly posits here, about 3 major choices for your data processing. You could stick with base R. Of course, base R, it's got, plenty of ways to do these type of summaries, data.table, and dplyr. And they're all going to look quite different from each other. There has been a bit of a misconception over the years that data.table is almost directly linked to base R. That's not quite the case. Data.table is its own initiative. It is an add-on package that doesn't come with the base R installation, yet there has been some perception over the years that it was so tightly coupled with base R that it was somehow going hand in hand with that. No. That's definitely not the case. It's got its own, framework. It's got its own syntax. It's got its own paradigms. And again, in my opinion, choice is great in this space. Now, sometimes the cons of choice is, well, which one do I go with? Well, we're not going to always use a cliche. It depends, but a lot of it does actually depend on what you want out of your data processing pipeline. But this shouldn't be a situation where you feel like you have to pick one and stick with it forever. Just like any project, you should have the ability to choose the right framework for your requirements or for your job, so to speak, and what's important to you. But it's one, she also talks in this post, is that, sometimes people feel like they have to be loyal to a certain package through and through, no matter what. No, we all greatly respect developers, but in the end, the choice is ours for what we choose in our data processing needs in this case. And you shouldn't feel bad about going from like a little bit of base R to like data.table or maybe the tidyverse and kind of as you wish to be able to mix these together. You're not confined to one framework or the other all the time. This is entirely driven by choice here. And so she recommends that let's be pragmatic about this. Let's not try to get into these, you might call camps or tribalism of having to really be gung-ho about one framework and you're going to fit this, use this hammer on every job, so to speak, no matter what. Let's be pragmatic about it. But then she gets to the rest of the next part of the post where she talks about kind of what's the reason that this is coming about, that she wants to, put this out in the universe, so to speak. Well, in 2018, Mike, there was a certain event on at the time was one of the leading spaces for kind of social type discussions in the art community on Twitter, back when it was called Twitter. There was what she calls the Great Twitter War of 2018, and take that for whatever irony you want to read with that. But Mike, just what in the heck, for those that weren't around, what was this all about here?
Yeah, there were some accounts on Twitter and some folks that I guess decided to, for whatever reason at that point in time, get fired up about whether or not you should be using data.table or dplyr. It actually led, as Kelly, I believe, points out, to some positive conversations between some of the cooler heads and actually maybe the more important folks on both sides of the fence, including Matt Dowell and Hadley Wickham, I believe, to the development of the dplyr package, which is sort of the best of both worlds, where you're allowed to write dplyr syntax that actually translates and executes data.table code under the hood. So you get your dplyr syntax, but you get your data.table performance, which was pretty cool. But 2018 on Twitter was a little bit of a different time. Your timeline was actually relevant to the people that you followed and the type of content that you wanted to see, as opposed to nowadays. I don't think I see any posts from any of my followers on there, but I guess I'll digress. It was, I would like to say, a better time for the data science in our community, and it was a nice place to come together, as opposed to now we have a few disparate places to try to do that, Mastodon being one of those places. But for whatever reason, most of the discourse most of the time was great. And in 2018, a few people decided to start, throwing stones from the data.table and tidyverse sides of the fence at each other for some reason. But I think most of the cooler heads out there either stayed away and just sort of watched with their popcorn at how silly everybody was being, or tried to add their 2 cents and make the conversation a little more productive, as I think some folks did. But that's social media, I guess, for you. And
for better or worse, Mike, for better or worse.
Exactly. I think there was a lot of better, but that was one case of it being worse. And yeah, I love the approach that Kelly took to this blog post, and I couldn't agree more. To me, not to draw too much of a parallel to like politics, but you don't always have to be in necessarily one camp or the other and just blindly believe and associate with one side or the other. From a project to project basis, data.table may make more sense for your project in one project, and then the next one that you go to, tidyverse, may make a whole lot more sense to use, and that is okay. Everyone listen, that is totally okay. Now DuckDB may be, the better solution than either one of those for your next project. Who knows? The thing that we love and that Kelly loves about the ecosystem is that we have choices, and that's incredible. And you should use whatever choice you feel makes the most sense to you at the time and for the particular project that you're working on. So, in my opinion, this is a great reflection. Very happy to hear that there's been some grant funding towards the data.table project that's going to allow that open source project to progress. That's something that we don't see a lot of the time, where open source developers and community actually get funding for their work and for all the hard work that has gone into this project. Because if you take a look at the history of data.table and what we're going on 15 years, or something like that, right? Going on 15, 16 years of the data.table project. There's been an incredible amount of work that has gone into it and helped it evolve and get to the place it is now. So it's fantastic to see a piece of software have that type of longevity, and it looks like that's only going to continue.
Absolutely. And Kelly will be talking a lot about this topic more in depth at both the Use Our conference coming up in July, as well as Posit conference. She'll have a talk about these themes. And what's interesting here is, as you mentioned, there is funding for this recent effort. And through a coincidental situation, I was able to hear more from Kelly herself in a recent meeting. But this funding is coming from a National Science Foundation grant that was carried out, I believe, back in 2023. In fact, we may have covered parts of this in our weekly highlights way back when the launch of what they called the data.table ecosystem project. And this is being headed by Toby Hocking, as well as Kelly's involved with this as well. We'll have a link to this in the supplements of the show notes here. But this is meant to not just look at data.table from literally just the source code perspective, but to help fund the ecosystem around it, which is both technical and infrastructure and social, and making sure that it is sustainable for the long term. Certainly, Kelly's going to be speaking about these themes in her upcoming talks. But there is one huge difference, and when you look at the history of data.table as opposed to the history of tidyverse, is that, let's be real here, who's funding the tidyverse? It is a dedicated vendor, i.e. Posit, helping to pay engineers full-time, open source engineers, to work on this. Data.table does not have that. It is enthusiastic developers from the community. Some of them started as users and then became developers because they were so enamored with the project and want to make sure it keeps going. But like many projects in open source, it is built on the community to help drive that innovation, drive that continued development. So I know part of the motivation of this grant is to help make sure that that ethos is sustainable for such an important piece of many, and I do mean many in the community, that rely on data.table for all sorts of uses. I mean, I just spoke of a couple of them, but I only scratched the surface. And I've had, like I said, great success with certain pieces of it in my workflows. And I don't feel shame about that. Like you said, Mike, I want to choose what's best for the job. And by golly, I'm not going to have any regret because in the end, I got to get my stuff done, right?
Exactly. And it's like I can't say enough. It's amazing that we have these choices. It's amazing that these choices are so robust and so powerful and so well supported. So, hats off to sort of a great perspective, I think, here by Kelly. Fortunate enough to, I believe, have met Kelly at last Posit conference. I think she was in our Shiny workshop, which was really cool.
That's right.
So she is absolutely awesome, and I'm very happy to see this blog post from her.
Well, we're going to go back to the development side, Mike, a little bit, because our next post is going to talk about ways that you can at least help future you even more, even when you're already buying into proper version control. And what we're talking about here is a latest post from Al Salmon, who, of course, has been a frequent contributor to Art Weekly, both as a curator and now contributor to many great highlights in this podcast. And she speaks about why you should invest in not just doing version control, but helping future you by making what she calls small and informative Git commits. Because I don't know about you, Mike, especially even now, sometimes when I'm in a tight bind and I realize, oh my goodness, I have about 10 files that I've got to get committed now because the time's running out. I fall to temptation, hit all the check boxes, hit stage, just say, get this a prod in my commit and be done with it. Yes, it still happens. Yes, I know better. And that's why this post is going to help you figure out why what I did was such a big mistake. Because let's say you get to a point in time and you're either doing a code review, maybe a colleague's doing a code review, for example, and they see a line in your code and they're thinking, well, Eric, why did you do that? Like, what was the motivation for that line? You don't have a comment around it because at the time you're just trying to fix an issue or something in your head, and then you didn't put it into prosperity and be a commit or a comment. Well, of course, with Git, you can go back and look at the history of your commits, right? And in fact, there is a concept in Git. They call it Git blame, but I'm with my owl here. I hate that terminology. It's really not blaming anybody, but it's better to be called Git explain. I like the way she phrases that, because then in a platform such as GitHub, you could have the view of the code itself, i.e. the file, but then next to it, see which commit message related to that change. And you might see in that example that I gave that this mysterious line was part of like this massive 10 file commit, and you just have something that says, get the prod or just get it done, get it out of my hair or whatever you want to call it. Well, that's not going to help very much. But had you done small, informative commit messages where you do like one file at a time or maybe a set of related changes, even if they're spread across multiple files, that Git blame methodology can be very helpful for you to go back in time and figure out what were you trying to fix? Were you trying to add a new feature? What was the motivation for that? A bit of like a way to get a lens into your development journey of what happened there. So again, if you do what I said was a bad thing to do and just put all these files in one big commit, you're not going to get any real benefit out of that. But like I said, had you done a small informative message of that particular change, and again, it might be one file, it might be related files, it's going to make it so much easier for both you and collaborators to figure out just what was your motivation for that. So that's one reason to do it. But there is another reason, especially if you realize that over time, maybe it's only like a month later, maybe it's a long time later, something is not working. And you've got to figure out just where it started to not work. That's where Mike Shia takes us onto another concept in Git that I don't do enough of, but can definitely save your behind on certain situations. Why don't you take us through that?
Yeah, so Mael talks about this tool that I admittedly do not use this function, I guess you might call it, that Git offers us, called Git bisect. And what Git bisect allows you to do is to try to identify the particular commit in history where your software was working. And it'll make you try some commits to help pinpoint, which commit exactly introduced the bug that you're now observing. And it sort of breaks your code into two sections, sort of before everything was working, and then after sort of everything fell apart. And it will assume that all commits up to that particular commit that you're bisecting on were good, and it's going to make you sort of explore commit by commit the following ones to figure out exactly what introduced the breaking change. And it's a really nice feature that sort of allows us to, I don't know, it almost feels like the debugger in a way in R, where you're able to sort of go commit by commit very slowly and figure out exactly which one is the one that introduced that breaking change. And hopefully, if you made small commits, we're able to identify that git commit that broke things as, this small diff that in Mel's example shows, 2 changed files with 3 additions and 2 deletions. If we're very unlucky, it's going to have a message like one of those that Eric writes occasionally, and I have never, certainly ever written a commit like that says, commit a bunch of files, and it's at, 6 o'clock on a Friday, and the diff shows 145 changed files with 2,600 additions and 2,200 deletions. We certainly hope that's not the case, but maybe it is. But Git bisect can help you get to that point. One nice additional thing that we have in our ecosystem now is both unit testing and services like GitHub Actions and formerly Travis, to when you do make a new commit, you can test, you can execute your unit test to make sure that everything continues to work after that new commit has been introduced. And this is certainly something that I think everybody that uses Git can be guilty of, is not making small enough commits. I have sort of this long-standing issue where I know that I need to make multiple changes to the same file, and I will make the first change and forget to just sort of commit that small change, and I will make 3 different conceptual changes within the same file. And now I either am at the mercy of trying to undo those particular changes number 2 and 3 and just revert back to change 1 and make my commit message small and related to that, or try to write some 3-part commit message that sort of tries to explain the 3 different changes that took place, but it's not good, and neither way is really ideal or easy. So the best thing that I could possibly do is to stop after I make that first change to the file, make my commit, and move on to the second change. But sometimes, when you're in the zone, it's hard. It's hard to stop and lift your fingers up off the keyboard and remember to do that instead of just knocking everything out at the same time. But Git blame is, and it should be called Git explain, I agree as well, I think is a fantastic tool when we do have to go back and try to figure out sort of what went wrong, what is the status of our software at the point in time that things went wrong, what does our repository look like, and how can we sort of pinpoint where things went wrong and what led to that. I think Git blame is a fantastic tool. I admittedly don't use it enough, but I do know the people that do use it rave about it and find it very helpful to their workflows. So it's one that I think Mael is inspiring me to dive a little bit deeper into and to start using a little bit more. So I certainly appreciate the overview here. I appreciate the introduction into Git bisect as well, because I think that is going to be a new handy tool that I'll be able to use in these tricky situations where something breaks and it's not trivial to pinpoint where it took place.
I really like your relation earlier to the concept of Git bisect and debugging your code, because it made me think of a debugging technique that bisect kind of mirrors a little bit, in that if you have a long R script, whether it's a Shiny module or any data processing thing, for example, and you know there's an error somewhere, maybe it's a function or whatnot, but you just don't quite know where it is. A lot of times what people will do is they will comment out or start putting the browser at like a halfway point. And then they'll see, oh, wait, is the error happening before this or after this? And if it's happening after somewhere, then you know that the rest of the code above it is working. And you kind of go in this, I don't know what the proper term is, but you kind of go half by half or a certain percentage. And that's where Git bisect kind of starts you off with, is you're going to find that known point, at least that you conjecture is, and then you tell it, okay, oh yeah, this one works. I'm going to go to the next part, and the next part, the next part. But none of this is going to help you if you don't follow the advice from the start on these fit for purpose, targeted commit messages. And again, yeah, Mike, you've always been a pro with this. Like you don't need any advice here. But little old me, yeah, I did some shortcuts even this year that I'm not proud of. So Mael gives me a reality check that, sometimes I need from time to time because I'm not perfect. What can I say? But if you want to practice some of this in the confines of R, Mael has made an R package, which I'm going to butcher the name once again, of Superlipopit or something to that effect, where you can practice Git concepts in R, albeit with your Git client at hand, to practice things like bisect, practice things like commit messaging or restoring or branching and things like that. So if this is all novel concepts to you and you're wondering what's an easy way to kind of practice this without risking the destruction of a production code base, I recommend her package, Superlipopit. That's the best I can do, but that's a great package nonetheless.
That's the best I could do as well. And it's my first time taking a look at that package, and it's incredible. It's fantastic. Allows you to practice all sorts of Git commands, including Git bisect, which is really, really cool. I think that's really powerful because it's very difficult to practice Git in a sandbox, I guess, unless you're spinning up a brand new project, but then you don't really have any history to play with. So this is a great reference here.
Yeah, and there's one other tidbit that I've seen both her mention, albeit not so much mentioned specifically, but then I see others in the community that I follow this trend as well, is that at the beginning of a commit, they'll have a short phrase, maybe a one-word phrase that describes the intent of that particular commit. It may be fix or feature or chore or things like this. I'm trying to opt into that a bit more because that's a handy way, if you're looking at your history of your commit messages, to isolate very quickly to distinguish between a new feature type of commit versus a bug fix commit versus, oh, I got to rerun that R oxygen documentation again, regenerate the man pages as like a chore kind of commit because it's a chore to do. I guess that's where that naming comes from, Mike. But have you done any of that in your commit messages?
I haven't. We have some folks on my team who are just fantastic developers who I have noticed recently do that. Very much so in all of their commits and are very consistent about it. And it's sort of a practice that I'm still maybe getting used to reading and trying to decide whether that is something that we should try to adopt globally across the team or not. I think the idea of creating issues and branches that reference those specific issues, and obviously your commit messages are on that particular branch, sort of lets me know exactly what is being accomplished here, with maybe without perhaps needing all the way down to sort of the commit message level of granularity, letting me know sort of what's being worked on. But I think on some particular projects, especially maybe where it's not as clear cut of an issue branching workflow, and maybe we're making commits to a particular branch that are across a wide variety of types and use cases, both development work, bug fixes, chores, things like that. I think that might be possibly a great idea. So it is something that I have seen. I'm just not sure if I am all in on it yet, but I don't see any drawbacks to it.
Yeah, I've been seeing it enough where it's like I'm going to start paying attention to it, and maybe for my next project I'll give it a shot. But like anything in Git, It's not just the mechanisms of doing it, it's the discipline to keep doing it. And again, if nothing else to take away from this, be kind to future you, be kind to future collaborators. Small, fit-for-purpose commit messages will help you. Even if it takes a while to get used to, you'll thank yourself later. And yeah, that goes with testing as well. Don't ask me why I think testing is a good thing, because I've been bit by that too, albeit not with hardware failures.
When AI does finally get good enough, I will try to create a Mael hologram rubber duck on my desk that can just yell at me when I'm doing the wrong software development practice, because I need this advice constantly, and I'm very grateful to all these blog posts that she puts together to remind me to stay the course and continue to incorporate those best practices.
Unlike some other things in AI, that is one that I would welcome to have next to me, monitoring me at many points in my dev journey.
Me too.
And rounding out our highlights today, at the risk of dating myself with a reference here, I feel the need for something, Mike. You know what I feel the need of? The need for speed. Because it doesn't just apply to one aspect of data processing. It also applies to the way we consume data coming from these robust APIs, and combining that with the very vast evolving ecosystem of geospatial data and performance. Our next highlight has the intersection of all of these, and definitely made me do a few double takes in terms of the metrics that we're about to talk about here. In particular, we're talking about this post that comes from Josiah Perry, who has been a longtime member of the R community, and his tagline lately is helping R be built and used better in production. And his blog post here is his journey on making what he calls a ridiculously fast API client in R. And his day job is working for a company called Esris, who is specializing in putting on these certain services to query geospatial data from many different development frameworks. I believe they have some hosted services as well. Well, I'm guessing as part of his daytime responsibilities, Josiah has released a new R package called ArcGIS Geocode, all one word, the big name here, which is an R binding and R interface to what they call the ArcGIS World Gcoder service. And he says that this looks like an official package from his organization, Esri, in this space. And in his knowledge, up to this point, he's got some metrics to prove it. He claims that this is the fastest geocoding library available in the entire R ecosystem. In fact, he claims that ArcGIS Geocode is about 17 times faster when you do what's called a single address geocoding, and almost 40 times faster when doing a reverse geocoding lookup as compared to other packages in the community already in this space. So let's dive into this a bit more. His first reason for why this is important is that something I took for granted until a recent project I talked about at the onset with some of this podcast metadata JSON data, is that parsing JSON data is not always fast, my friend. Not always. Many of us are using JSON Lite, the almost tried and true package offered by your own OOMs for consuming and writing JSON data in R. And it's been a huge help to me. Don't get me wrong, but it does have some performance issues, especially when dealing with long text strings in your JSON data, and then bringing that conversion back to an R object and the other way around. Well, guess what? Another language that starts with R comes to the rescue in Josiah's initiative, because there is a Rust crate, that's kind of their term for packages, called Serde or Serd, I'm not sure if I'm saying it right, that handles both the serialization and deserialization of structures in Rust. And guess what? It is very tailor-made to JSON data too. It just expects you at the onset to help specify for your given JSON type data you want inside your session, the specific attributes of each variable or each field. So in his example, he's got an address structure, if you call it, with all the different fields that would come out of this JSON data. And most of them, big surprise, are strings. But it'll give you the ability in Rust to really determine what's supposed to be a string, what's supposed to be an integer, different types of integers. You can go, really specific on all these needs. Now, that's great and all, but how does that help with R? Well, there is the package called Extender, which is kind of like the RCPP, if you will, of Rust to R. Will let you tap into a Rust crate and bring that into R and be able to go back and forth with R functions to basically call out to these lower level Rust parts of the paradigm. So this Serde JSON crate is a massive speed improvement in general for importing JSON data, serializing JSON data over the community counterparts, as he attests to in this post. But that's not the only part. The other part is a feature that I should have known about in my research in HTTR2, but it just went over my head until this post, is that we often use HTTR or HTTR2, and this is the regeneration of that, if you will, by Hadley Wickham, to help in R perform these requests to API services like GET requests, POST requests, and whatnot. And usually I do these requests kind of one at a time, if you will. Like there's a GET request. I'm going to do that with a specific set of config parameters, bring it back down and whatnot. Well, how in the world did I not know about this function, Mike? Rec perform parallel, which lets you do it in more than one time. Oh my gosh, where have I been, Mike? Did you know about this?
Neither did I, Eric. I had no idea that this was part of the HTTR2 package now, that we have the ability to send, I guess, parallelized requests to an API pretty easily and maybe point that function towards a connection pool or a few different nodes, a few different workers to be handling requests concurrently. This makes me think of, potential integration with the crew package or something like that. Perhaps this is something that you could do on your own machine and leverage, the ability to parallelize your own machine and send out a few different requests at the same time, which is pretty incredible. And there's this Twitter thread that Josiah puts earlier on in the blog post where he's showing off the fact that he was able to geocode 2.6 thousand addresses in 3.5 seconds, and somebody asked as a reply to that particular screenshot that he put up, they said, "Isn't geocoding always bottlenecked by the server?" And that is true, but I guess when you have multiple servers to span the job across, and we have this beautiful function request perform parallel that I imagine brings it all back together at the end, that's a fantastic utility to be able to speed up significantly. And this is something that I've dealt with in the past as well. Geocoding, it takes time because you're typically going address by address, and a lot of projects you'll want to be geocoding your entire data frame, which could get particularly long, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of observations that you need to geocode. So it's really interesting to me that we have the ability, not only to leverage the speed of Rust for this serializing and deserializing of JSON objects, which is time intensive, but also being able to just break the job out into across a few different nodes here, which is pretty incredible, something that I didn't know about. Obviously, Josiah says that you need to be a little bit careful when you are doing anything like this, especially when you're sending sort of parallelized requests at a different service, that you don't perform an accidental denial of service attack, which is where you make way too many requests all at once to the service and bring that down. So you don't want to be the person that does that. So certainly be careful, and perhaps use a small number of workers. If you're just geocoding a couple thousand addresses, you don't need to spin up a few hundred workers or something like that to be able to do that. Just spin up a couple and maybe wait those extra few seconds that it's going to take to be patient between spinning up a few workers and many workers. But it's really interesting because you will get this great sort of orders of magnitude returns in performance when you do add compute to the problem here, as well as leveraging Rust for that quick deserialization of JSON data. One thing that I will also shout out, just because I was curious about this, and we're finding all of these new, faster programming software utilities out there when it comes to data. And there is a DuckDB extension as well for handling JSON data and reading JSON data in. So I would be interested to see how that compares to what Rust can do for parsing JSON data as well. But both very fast, I'm sure.
Yeah, they are. I'm experiencing that a little bit too, actually, in my DuckDB adventures, and I'll definitely come back with my findings as I get that more polished, albeit the hardware catastrophe put a stop on that for a bit. But nonetheless, I'm really intrigued by the concepts that Josiah puts in this post here. And then at the end, he recommends additional packages in the community that if you're still not quite ready for the plunge to Rust for some of these efforts, if you're not ready to build like an internal JSON parser that depends on Rust, there are some additional JSON related packages in the R community that definitely take a look at. He recommends the RCPP SIMD JSON package as a great way for parsing data, as well as the YY JSON package that comes from the affectionately known Cool But Useless on the R community. He's got a great package called YY JSON, and also JSONify, which I don't have as much experience with. But you might want to take a look at each of those too and see if for your parsing needs or writing serialization needs, if that just gets you good enough while being able to stay in the confines of R directly. But nonetheless, this is great learning for me personally as I'm starting to deal with JSON data more and more in my open source work, as well as my internal day job stuff, where we just built an API binding package, but we're running this in the day-to-day use with a patient level data set where there's like multiple visits, multiple obviously patients in a treatment group, and it's basically doing these GET requests to this custom service one at a time for each of these calls. My goodness, I could do the rec perform parallel and probably speed that up a bit. So I'm going to have to take a look at this and hopefully not make my IT admins angry when I start to parallelize this.
Definitely do it on a development cluster to start. That would be my recommendation.
Yes, because, that was another story time from years ago when I was too greedy with multi-cores and I took down an entire HPC cluster. Don't be that person, everybody. Just don't be that person.
I remember that story.
Yes, who lives in infamy. But what lives in good ways, of course, is the rest of the R Weekly issue itself. Tony's done a terrific job, as always he does, with the rest of the issue. We got so much we could talk about, but we're going to have to wrap up here with our additional finds for this issue. And Mike knows, and many of you know, I am a retro gamer at heart, not just with retro games, but also I have fond memories of going to the local arcade and putting some quarters in those awesome pinball machines. Could waste a lot of hours on that. Well, there is a fun post that combines things like geospatial data, API calls, and some handy visualizations from Rasmuth Bath. He calls this the public pinball machines per capita, looking at where pinball machines are most distributed around the world. And in his post, surprise, surprise, the United States is in the lead with this, but Europe is not far behind in some of their visualizations. But his post goes into how he attained this data, loading the packages, and guess what? It's coming from an API, just like everything else. He's got some, really elegant code to do this. Really modern code here. I believe it's using HTTR2 as well. And some great handy visualizations building ggplot for the distribution of these pinball locations, and some word clouds too. So really, really fun stuff here. And it makes me get the itch to get some quarters out and find that retro arcade to knock out some pinball action. So that was fun. But Mike, what did you find?
Very cool, Eric. I found an oldie but a goodie. I think at the recent R conference that's held in New York by that Lander Analytics hosts, there was a panel discussion about your favorite R package. And I believe it was, who's the author of the data science Venn diagram there? Drew Conway. He was being asked what his favorite R package was, and I think it was one, it was called iGraph, and I think it's one that's been around for a long time for doing, I believe, network analysis type stuff in R. And I saw in the highlights this week that iGraph has crossed the 2.0 threshold. So it sounds like, similar to data.table, that this is another package that has had quite a life to it, continues to be very, very well maintained, and it's just awesome to see a package like that be able to have the longevity it has.
Yeah, iGraph, I have tremendous respect for. It is the engine behind many, and I do mean many, of the R packages that provide some kind of network visualization or processing. My exposure to this has been using some custom iGraph bindings inside a widget called Viz Network, which I have a kind of a love-hate relationship with, but I've done enough customization to wrangle it to my particular needs. But yeah, iGraph's been around a long time, and it is prevalent in additional languages as well. But yeah, huge congrats to that team for the 2.0 release. And I know, I hope iGraph stays around for a long time, because it is a fundamental pillar in these network visualizations. So awesome call out there.
iGraph 0.1 released in 2006, even older than data.table.
My goodness, yeah. As if I didn't feel old enough in this post. Good grief. What are you doing to me, man? I need to get a youth injection or something. But what makes it feel youthful is just seeing what's happening in this community. Again, really great developments happening, really great showcases of data science, providing good to everybody involved. So where can you see this all? Where we've been talking about here. So many other great links are available at rwiki.org. Many additional findings here, many additional developments of packages. We need to touch on all the newer packages out there. There's so much happening in these spaces. But we invite you to bookmark that site if you haven't already, to check it out on a weekly basis. And also, we love hearing from you in the community. There are many ways to get in touch with us. You can send us a contact or message on our contact page, which is in the episode show notes. So again, keep those comments coming. We love to hear from you. You can also, in the modern podcast apps, such as Podverse, Fountain, Cast-O-Matic, CurioCaster, there's a whole bunch out there. You could send us a fun little boost along the way if you want to send us a message without any middle thing in between. And no hardware failures on that one either. And the other way you can contact us is on social media as well. I am mostly on Mastodon these days with @ourpodcast and podcastindex.social. I am also on LinkedIn. Just search for my name there. You'll find me there. And sporadically on the Weapon X thing with @theRcast. And a special little shout out, I didn't get to it in my stories time, but I had the great pleasure of having a little dinner with the author of GT, Rich Ione, who was in town for a local conference. So great fun talking with him, all things R and someone he's up to. So Rich, if you're listening, thanks for coming into town, even for a brief couple days. Had a lot of fun learning from you. But Mike, where can listeners get a hold of you?
That is awesome. I am so excited for Posit Conference this year to be able to see some community faces. But folks, until then, can get a hold of me on Mastodon at Mike_Thomas at Fostodon.org, or on LinkedIn. If you search Ketchbrook Analytics, KETCHBROOK, you can see what I'm up to.
Yes, and hopefully I don't see any messages about any failures in your infrastructure. Let's call it that. Let's keep our fingers crossed. But just don't do what I did. That's the best advice for today. But in any event, we thank you so much for joining us wherever you are, and wherever you are in your R journey. We hope that we're a little bit of a help along the way. And one of the best ways also to help us out is just share the word. If you got value out of this podcast, we'd love for you to share it around, tell your friends, and always great to expand our audience for those that are getting started with R. We think R Weekly is one of the best resources for anybody in this community. Am I biased? Absolutely yes. But hey, I speak the truth here, I think. In any event, we're going to close up shop here, and we'll be back with another edition of our weekly highlights next week.